Welcome back. Daily Show, hitting you on this 23rd day of January as we are awaiting that winter storm that's getting ready to overtake Alton and the Midwest. And as we're getting ready to stay at home for a couple of days, you know, we're always gearing up for the primary. And coming up in March, we'll be getting ready to give you full coverage. Raja Krishnamoorthi is a congressman for Illinois, and it's a pleasure to have him on the show today. Raja, thank you so much for your time, and really excited to talk with you about this run for U.S. Senate.
Hey, absolutely, CJ. Thanks for talking to me.
Well, and as we dive into this, you know, your background as a congressman, take me through just the lead up to this point and the decision to run.
Well, you know, I think I've mentioned this before, but I think that the reason for my run is really my origin story. I've mentioned this, but, you know, I was born in India, came to this country when I was 3 months old. Things were going good until they suddenly went bad in the recession of the 1970s. My father lost his income, but thanks to the generosity of the American people, we were allowed to move into public housing and food stamps. Then my father got on his feet and got a great job in, of all places, Peoria, Illinois, and moved to Peoria, moved into the middle class. And pretty much every night at the dinner table, my father would say something like, you know, think of the greatness of this country, and whatever you do, make sure it's there for the next family who need it. And so that became the North Star of my personal compass, my mission statement, and my why. And I've been pursuing that in Congress for the last 10 years. And now when the opportunity presented itself upon Dick Durbin's retirement, I decided to seek a promotion and pursue that mission statement at a higher level and hopefully with even greater and wider impact.
Well, and going into just the shoes to fill, really, for Dick Durbin, who had such a legacy, really, in the state of Illinois and throughout national politics, take me through just, you know, if everything aligns, the stars align, and you're elected congressman in November, the primary goes well, what would you take away from the tenure of a Dick Durbin, and how would you, transition into that role?
Well, first of all, you know, Dick Durbin's a legend for his constituent services and just looking out for every part of the state, regardless of where you live. And as a son of downstate myself, that's incredibly important to me as well. And I would continue to do everything I can to continue that legacy. Secondly, from a policy standpoint, we are in very similar positions with regard to a number of issues. For instance, with regard to Dreamers, which Dick Durbin has really pioneered the legislation on, I would want to do everything I can to help Dreamers, but also fix our legal immigration system. But, you know, beyond that, I think that one slight difference, or maybe slight difference of emphasis, is, you know, I authored our nation's laws modernizing our nation's skills-based career, technical, and vocational education systems, which help the 62% of Americans without a four-year college degree, while people with a four-year college experience might have a world-class experience. I don't think that the rest, the non-four-year college track folks, have a similar experience, and we have to change that. My law was wildly successful, helping 11 million people get a higher quality skills-based education, but it's been terribly underfunded. And so that would be a big focus for me. I guess the last thing that I would mention is I told you that as a child, as an infant, we faced food insecurity, and thanks to food stamps, now known as SNAP, we were allowed to kind of survive and live to fight another day. That is an issue of great importance to me. Our national school lunch program right now helps 30 million children get a free lunch every day, but there's maybe 10 million who don't get it who are qualified. I'd like to have a universal free lunch program so that every child has at least one strong square meal every day, and that increases attendance. A universal free lunch program reduces stigma, and most importantly, it increases their ability to learn. And that's very important to me, to invest in our future and our future, our children.
Absolutely. And, I'm sure over the last, couple of months and the last couple of years and throughout your career, you've met so many families and you've gotten to meet so many different individuals that come from all different walks of life. Right now, Congressman, what are you hearing the most of? What is the most important issue, in your opinion, just based on the conversations you've been having with constituents, that's affecting them the most?
Two things. One, just the affordability of everything. It's just they can't afford the staples of what I call the American dream. And probably the best example of that is not being able to afford a home. And so there I've introduced legislation to provide a $25,000 tax credit phased in over 5 years to help first-time home buyers pay for their upfront costs, which really kind of get in the way of them owning a home. And this really affects young people more than anything else. I should say that $25,000 tax credit or upwards of 10% of the value of a home would essentially help everybody, but I would also create a special situation where we could reward it all in the first year for teachers, childcare workers, as well as first responders. These are folks who we want to help, especially because they have jobs that require them to oftentimes live close to where they work. And they can't, you can't call in, you can't do a remote work day as a police officer.
Right.
So, we gotta help them even more. And so this is one of those pieces of legislation I'm hoping to move as well.
Well, and really, that's a huge piece of legislation, especially for those first responders and those folks that qualify for that first year. And going into that a little bit further, to me, that seems like just a nonpartisan issue. And when in a world right now where everything's it just seems so combustible, and the vitriol is there, and you have just the rhetoric that's there. How important is it to still fight for the issues that you believe in, and also, still reach across the aisle and represent all voices within your state?
I'm really glad you brought that up. I think that yes, we need to demand accountability from the Trump administration. I actually have I call a 17-point plan to kind of bring accountability to the Trump administration on a principled basis, whether it's accountability for ICE, which I believe is acting with impunity, or, reining in the pardon power, which I believe is now a new form of corruption, or has introduced a new form of corruption at the White House. And we have to do those things. But at the same time, where there's an opportunity to work with people across the aisle, we have to do that as well. And I'm known for that in Washington, D.C. I talked about the skills-based education effort, but another effort that I led that was a bipartisan one that led to a law was providing mental health resources for healthcare professionals, so nurses, medical students, doctors who have long suffered much higher degrees of burnout than other professions, and that came to a head during the pandemic. And so that was a bipartisan effort. I've also led initiatives with Republicans with regard to, strengthening our nation's national security from my perch on the Intelligence Committee, as well as I was the ranking member of the what's kind of colloquially known as the China Committee in Congress.
Well, and Congressman, that's what I was interested to kind of wrap this conversation up with, if it's okay, because your background is there. And as we're going into primary season, I think the thing that's on my mind and a lot of voters' minds, too, is when we hear the word, redistricting, and I'm not talking necessarily with your race, but, when it comes to primary season and redistricting, is there ever a worry that it becomes a point where we're fighting harder to get out of a primary than it is to, compete in a general election in a specific district? Is that ever a concern? And I'm not saying that as a partisan question, but really just an overall question in the terms of balance. And just curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that as gerrymandering and the drawing of districts has become ever more polarized, essentially what has happened is that in many cases, especially for, congressional seats, the main contest is the primary as opposed to the general election. And so what that ends up doing is I think people start to race ever more to the extremes in order to, curry favor with their base. And you see this especially, in the MAGA far right, where this is happening to the point where, I think they are actually actively cultivating, certain white nationalist or extremist groups. I'm writing a letter today. I can't believe I'm doing this, to the Department of Labor, talking about how they are actually echoing white nationalist sentiment in their social media posts, and anti-Semitic posts. I mean, this is the stuff that I didn't think I'd be writing a letter on 10 years into my tenure in Congress, and yet that's happening. And I think that's a function of what you were talking about originally, which is, basically people kind of playing to the extremes, and that's, I think, a dangerous course.
Is there something that has been just front of mind that you're ready to tackle day one that you look forward to the most if everything aligns?
Well, after I find out where the restrooms are, I will then take up the issue of, trying to figure out, how best I can take a leadership position on these issues and be effective. A long time ago, in Washington, D.C., I decided there's the main question you have to answer is, do you want to be viral or do you want to be effective? And the closest thing I've been to being viral is I had COVID a few years ago. And so I decided I'd be effective. And what that means to me is, as I said before, taking a principled stand on the issues, holding government accountable, but also, seeing where there's room for, working with people on the other side. So I would hope to listen to my colleagues, tell them where my priorities are, and then find common ground. Fortunately, I've had a chance to work with some of them from the House, with them in the Senate, and hopefully I can build some more ties and actually get things done. I think at the end of the day, that's what people want. They want results. They want less talk. They want more results.
Absolutely. Congressman, thank you so much for your time. And as the months start to creep up on us and we get closer and closer to the day, we'd love to have you back here on the show as we start tackling more important issues, and really just great to get to know you and your platform today.
Yes, sir. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you. We'll take a quick break. Daily Show on this 23rd day of January continues right after this in the heart of the 618.